The destruction of culture sees the state or the group prosecuting the war take control of the two most important mediums that transmit information to the nation, the media and the schools. The alleged war crimes of the enemy, real and imagined, are played and replayed night after night, rousing a nation to fury. In the Middle East and the Balkans, along with many other parts of the world, children are taught to hate. In Egypt, pupils are told Jews are interlopers and on Arab land. Israel does not appear on school route maps. In Jordan, children learn that Christians are infidels who must be forced into submission, that the Jewish Torah is perverted, and that Jews have only their own evil practices to blame for the Holocaust. Syrian schoolbooks extort students to holy war and paint pictures of Israelis perpetrating beastly crimes and horrendous massacres, burying people alive in battle and dancing drunk in Islamic holy places in Jerusalem. And Israel, despite efforts in secular state schools to present a more balanced view of Arab history, allows state-funded religious schools to preach that Jewish rule should extend from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in Iraq, and that the Kingdom of Jordan is occupied Jewish land. The reinterpretation of history and culture is dizzying and dangerous, but it is the bedrock of the hatred and intolerance that leads to war. On June 28, 1914, Gavrilo Princip shot and killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in a Sarajevo street, an act that set off World War I. But what makes him in Bosnia depend on which lesson plan you pick up. A hero and a poet, says a textbook handed to high school students in the Serb-controlled region of this divided country. An assassin trained and instructed by the Serbs to commit this act of terrorism, says a text written for the Croatian students. A nationalist whose deeds sparked anti-Serbian rioting that was only stopped by police from all three ethnic groups, reads the Muslim version of the event. In communist Yugoslavia, Princip was a hero, but with the partition of Bosnia along ethnic lines, huge swathes of history are reinterpreted. The Muslim books, for example, portray the Ottoman Empire's rule over Bosnia, which lasted 500 years, as a golden age of enlightenment. The Serbs and Croats commend it as an age of brutal occupation. These texts have at least one thing in common, a distaste for Marshal Tito, the communist leader who ruled the country from 1945 to 1980 and was a staunch opponent of the nationalist movements that now hold power. And Tito's state pioneered the replacement of history with myths, forcing school children to memorize mythical stories about Tito's life and aphorisms. By the time today's books in the Balkans reach recent history, the divergence takes on ludicrous proportions. Each side blames the other for the Bosnian War and makes no reference to crimes or mistakes committed by its own leaders or fighters. The Muslims are taught that the Serbs attacked our country and started the war. The Serbs are told that Muslims, with the help of Mujahideen fighters from Pakistan, Iraq, and Iran, launched a campaign of genocide against the Serbs that almost succeeded. The Croatian students learned that Croatian forces in the homeland fought off Serbian and Muslim aggressors. Even the classics get twisted into political diatribe. I saw a Milosevic production of Hamlet in Belgrade that was scripted to convey the message that usurping authority, even illegitimate authority, only brings chaos and ruin. Hamlet was portrayed as a bold and decisive man, constantly training for battle. He was not consumed by questions about the meaning of existence or a desire to withdraw from society, but the steely drive to seize power, even if it plunged the kingdom into chaos. Horatio, usually portrayed as thoughtful and humane scholar, was the incarnation of evil. Hamlet's treachery was illustrated at the conclusion of the play when Prince Fortinbras of Norway entered Elsinore to view the carnage. Fortinbras, dressed to look like the chief European representative at the time in Bosnia, Carl Bildt, walked on stage with a Nazi marching song as his entrance music. He unfolded maps showing how, with collapse of authority, he has now carved up Serbian territory among foreign powers. Here is a Hamlet for our time, the director Dejan Krustovic told me. We want to show the audience what happened when individuals tamper with power and refuse to sublimate their own ambitions for the benefits of the community. Because of Hamlet, the bodies pile up on the altar of authority and the system collapses. Because of Hamlet, the foreign prince Fortinbras, who for us represents the New World Order, comes in from the outside, seizing control as happened to the Serbs throughout their history. Every reporter struggles with how malleable and inaccurate memory can be when faced with trauma and stress. Witnesses to war, even moments after killing or an atrocity, often cannot remember what took place in front of them. They struggle to connect disparate images, and those who see events with some coherency find there is an irresistible pull to twist the facts to conform to the myth. Truth in such moments is too nuanced, and the contradictory for most to swallow. It is best left untouched. I went one rainy afternoon to the Imperial War Museum in Vienna, mostly to see the rooms dedicated to the 1878 Bosnian Rebellion and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. His car, peppered with bullet holes, and the blood-stained couch on which he died are on display. But I also wandered through the other rooms designed to honor the bloodlust and forgotten skirmishes of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When I finished with the World War I exhibit, I looked for the room dedicated to World War II. There wasn't one. And when I inquired at the desk, I was told there was no such exhibit in the city. World War II, at least in terms of the collective memory of the Austrian nation, unlike in Germany, might as well not have existed. Indeed, in one of the great European perversions of memory, many Austrians have come to think of themselves as victims of that war. The destruction of culture plays a critical role in the solidification of a wartime narrative. When the invisible and tangible symbols of one's past are destroyed or denied, the past can be recreated to fit the myth. It is left only to those on the margin to keep the flame of introspection alive. Although the destruction of culture is often so great that the full recovery is impossible. Yugoslavia, a country that had had a vibrant theater and cinema, has seen its cultural life wither, with many of its best talents living in exile or drinking themselves to death in bars in Belgrade or Vienna. Most societies never recover from the self-inflicted wounds made to their own culture during wartime. War leaves behind not memory but amnesia. Once war ends, people reach back to the time before the catastrophe. The books, plays, cinemas take up the established cultural topics. Authors and themes are often based on issues and ideas that predated the war. In post-war Germany, it was as if Weimar had never ended, as if the war was just some bad, horrible dream from which everyone had just awoken and nobody wanted to discuss. This is why the wall of names, that is, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, is so important. It was not a project funded or organized by the state, but by those who survived and insisted we not forget. It was part of America's battle to turn to truth, part of our desire for forgiveness. It ultimately held out to us as a nation the opportunity for redemption, although the state has prodded us back towards the triumphalism that led us into Vietnam. But just as the aggressors engage in selective memory and myth, so do the victims, building unassailable moments to their own suffering. It becomes impossible to examine, to dispute, or to criticize the myths that has grown up around us, past suffering of nearly all in war. The oppressors are painted by the survivors as monsters. The victims paint themselves as holy innocents. The oppressors work hard to bury inconvenient facts and brand all in wartime with the pitch of atrocity. They strive to reduce victims to their moral level. Each side creates its own narrative. Neither is fully true. Until there is a common vocabulary and shared historical memory, there is no peace in any society, only an absence of war. The fighting may have stopped in Bosnia or Cyprus, but this does not mean the war is over. The search for a common narrative must, at times, be forced upon a society. Few societies seem able to do this willingly. The temptation, as with the Turks and the Armenian genocide, is to forget or ignore, to wallow in the lie. But the reconciliation, self-awareness, and finally the humility that makes peace possible come only when a culture no longer serves a cause or myth, but the most precious and elusive of all human narratives: truth.